Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Hamilton, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm so excited for today's returning guest. This is either your second or third, probably your third time on the show. Danielle Hamilton is in the house. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with new stuff to talk about today.
Yes, I know. And this is long overdue. I know you've done some incredible work, obviously, over the years, and we've been very closely connected in the work that we've been doing and often share a lot of clients. And over the last while, it's been so beautiful to see you start shifting gears a little bit. And that's actually where I want to start kind of going into this. So for anyone who doesn't know Danielle, I'm not going to do a big fancy intro or your story because you've shared that on previous episodes, which I'll link below in the show notes. So if you want to learn more about Dani's journey, please go and listen to those. But yeah, this shift that you've been sort of shifting from, obviously you're a blood sugar specialist and you've recently over the last couple of months started talking about light and the sun and grounding and circadian rhythms and all these pieces as a baseline for our metabolic health. So, I'm curious, why that shift? What kind of grabbed you and pulled you into really diving into that area? And obviously we're going to learn more about it as we keep talking.
Yeah. So it was a slow shift, and it wasn't one thing that made me have any sort of an aha moment. It was just kind of just some lingering things. Like I would see clients who were doing really well with all that I taught, and they'd be in my programs and reversing their insulin resistance, reversing their prediabetes, getting off of metformin, these blood sugar drugs. And then I would see they have a high fasting glucose in the morning. And I was like, okay, maybe we need to look at the liver a little bit. And so we do some stuff with that. And it's just wasn't really working. And there's been a lot of cases of people doing everything right and still struggling. And I, as a practitioner, I'm like, what am I missing here? So I'm always, maybe one might argue I'm a little hard on myself, but I feel like, my people aren't making this up. And I'm also seeing a shift from when I started practicing until now. There's also been a shift. And so I just feel that my toolbox was lacking a little. And so I started seeing some people who I follow and admire, friends, colleagues, start posting about sunlight and circadian rhythm. And I didn't really know what that word was. It felt a little like, okay, I think I know a little bit, like something about being asleep and awake. And I was like, oh, I don't really know that much. And then I started hearing things like, okay, infrared light helps your mitochondria, which are these little powerhouses in our cells. They make the mitochondria use glucose faster, so they lower our blood sugar. I was like, oh, that's a really cool thing to know. And so I learned that the sun is, in the peak of the day, is about 49% infrared light. And so I was like, wow, that's a lot of percent, something if the sun, which gives life to all life on Earth, basically, is 49% infrared. It's probably a really important thing for human beings, right? So then I also learned that the light around sunrise has really high amounts of this infrared light. And so basically standing out there at sunrise is like being in front of those, like a giant infrared light panel, which I have one of those behind me. And so I said to my client, why don't you go outside at sunrise when, normally your blood sugar is going too high, that dawn phenomenon, and go outside at sunrise and be out there and let me know what happens. Sure enough, within 2 weeks, her blood sugar fasting, this person who had just such a consistently high blood sugar, it was like 104, 105. It was above where we wanted to be, kind of in the pre-diabetic range. It went down to a perfect 83. And so I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so powerful. And then I started learning how blue light, and when we think of blue light, I was confused at first when I'm hearing blue light, blue light. I'm like, my light bulbs are white. Like, where are you getting this blue from, right? Like my computer screen, it's not only blue, it's all different colors. But what I learned is that when we have technological devices like our screens, our iPhones, and light bulbs, even especially the modern ones that are LED, like when I used to change a light bulb when I was a kid, and I'm sure you'd remember this too, the light bulb was hot, right? Like it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, that it burns you, right? You have to wait for it to cool down to change it. Nowadays, I touch light bulbs and they don't get hot. And I'm like, what's happening here? Well, what they've done is actually taken the infrared out of light bulbs. So the
Wow.
incandescent light bulbs used to have that infrared frequency, which, as I said, lowers your blood sugar. And now they've taken it out in the name of energy conservation. Our windows block like 42% of it or something like that. Again, energy efficiency. And so all these devices that are giving off light that are in our modern day skew high in this blue light. So even though they look white, they're actually high in blue light, especially cool LEDs, especially our cell phones, our computers, our TVs, and then even just what we think of as natural light being inside, it's not actually natural because filtering it through glass, we block out a lot of frequencies. So these modern technological devices and lighting are high in blue light. And blue light, without that infrared, like how it would be in the sun, raises our blood sugar, our insulin, our cortisol. So I'm like, oh my goodness, this whole time, people could be just living their lives, eating what, this perfect diet and managing their stress and doing all these things. And their environment is basically sabotaging their progress. So there's alarming studies that we spend over 90% of our days indoors. So we're spending the very vast majority of our time inside under all this blue light, very devoid of infrared. Like right now, I live in Texas and I have the air conditioning going. I have the window closed only because there's construction. My neighbors are doing construction, but normally I'd have that open, so I get a little bit of that infrared. I get that right frequency. So instead, I have a red light therapy panel on my leg to reinsert some of this infrared light into my environment, because our indoor environments are really skewing our blood sugar and metabolic health to not be optimal. So those were
Wow.
some things that I saw that really made me say, I need to pay attention to this. And just one more thing that really hit me was, I would see someone saying like, oh, I bought these grounding shoes. And I look up the shoes. I'm like, oh, these are expensive. I'm like, that's not worth it. Right. In my mind, I'm like, it's not worth it. Like for the grounding, like what benefit is that actually going to give me? I've seen the grounding documentary, earthing documentary, and it's like, oh, it can reduce inflammation. But for me, I learned something that just really made it click for me. So one of the things I learned was that I have to take it back to a little bit of high school or middle school biology or chemistry or whatever. So just bear with me. I'm going to make it real easy to understand. So when we eat food, it breaks down not only into carbs, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, but it breaks down further into electrons. And if we remember back to like 8th grade chemistry, electrons are small particles with a negative charge. So it breaks down into these protons, the positive charge, electrons, and the electrons go down this thing called the electron transport chain in our mitochondria. And that's how they make energy for our body. So they make it in the form of ATP and also this stuff called cellular water, which is really cool, which we can talk about too. But it basically makes energy for our body. So food breaks down to electrons, blah, blah, blah. We get energy. Okay. So we can follow
Got
that,
it.
right? So then I learned that when the second you make contact with the ground, with a natural surface, or you're standing there in sneakers and you pinch a leaf that's on a tree, or you touch a blade of grass or a leaf that's on a bush or a flower, you are instantly soaking in electrons. And that flow of electrons is electricity. So we're just like a phone. So it's like plugging in the phone. We instantly get charge into our phone. And the same thing with us. The second we make contact with the earth, we're being charged basically, and we're getting those electrons. And remember what I just said, electrons, they go down the electron transport chain and make energy for our body. So I was like, holy cow, that's amazing to think we could also get energy from other places. I also learned that when the sunlight hits our skin, especially UV light, it gives us free electrons. We use that to make energy. So we lived on this earth as early humans, and we were always connected to the earth, and we lived outside. So we were always in contact with the sun. Even in the shade, you get all that infrared light because it bounces off of trees. But you get this light constantly from the sun, and then we were always in contact from the earth. So we were designed or evolved, whatever you believe, to get energy from above and below. And I thought that was so just simplistically beautiful, and how so many people struggle to get enough energy. And then they're in this battle with like, I need more carbs, but if I do too many carbs, it's spiking my blood sugar. And then if I don't do carbs, I don't have energy. And people are just struggling to have enough energy, right? And that's one of the things where you go outside and you get free energy, that only a third of our energy, more or less, should be coming from food. And the other 2/3 of it can be coming from sunlight and grounding and even movement. We can generate electrons. So I'll let you jump in because that was a lot, but but those are some things that really just struck me like, this is so cool.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love, obviously you're so lit up by this, right? And the like scientific pieces. I know a lot of my listeners love that too, like kind of needing to understand the science of it. And I'm sitting here listening going, well, of course, like this is how we were naturally raised. Like I'm the type of person who's like, I don't need to know the science. I just know that being outside and being barefoot and being connected with nature is like really important for our human health. And we've gotten really far away from that.
Right. And isn't it crazy that in nowadays it's like people are like, well, show me a study to prove that being outside is good for me.
Right. You're like, wait a second. Like, let's think back to our ancestors and, you know, the people before we started messing things up with all of our processed foods and indoor lifestyles and all the crap. Right. And like getting back to there's just, I feel, you know, in my work, in my life as well, this massive shift to like getting a little bit back into what they call the grandmother era, like getting back into our grandma era, right? Like
I love it.
Getting outside, preparing food, like just being more connected with the sun and all these really, really cool things. So yeah, that's amazing. And I'm laughing as you're sharing this. I'm like, oh, this is the rationale that a lot of I've heard of, and I've often just laughed and poo-pooed it, right? These breatharians who don't eat. And they literally just live from this. Please don't do that. We're not recommending that on this podcast. But I've heard of people who are like next level, like just getting all their energy from the sun and nature. And I don't personally believe that that's healthy, but obviously we can get energy from these places.
Yes.
And I've always 100% always feel more energized when I go outside or I'm connecting in that way, even if it's miserable out. So, and I think everybody listening can, you know, think of times when they felt that as well. So there's some science behind it now, everybody, if you needed that.
Yeah, lots of
Okay, so you shared a lot. There's so many things that I want to dive deeper into. Let's come back a little bit to like the circadian rhythm piece. Why is it important that our body knows what time it is? I think this is a really fascinating like angle to go with. And actually, how does our body know? You know, as you mentioned, many of my listeners might be in that space that you and I both were in a while ago. We're like, what the heck is a circadian rhythm, right? And and who cares what time of day it is? I'm going to stay up late and get up all over the place, and my body's
like,
always
who cares
confused.
when I eat? Like it's all going to the same place, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's a great question. And this was another one of those things that it was this aha moment for me, but it's not like this glamorous topic where you learn it and you're like, whoa, that's so cool. But one of the most stressful things for the body is not knowing what time it is. So I always like to say, have you ever taken a nap, like a really long nap, and you woke up and for a second you didn't know where you were, you didn't know what day it was, you didn't know who you were. It was like Memento, right? And so that movie, like back in the early 2000s. And what happens when that happens to you? You wake up and you're confused, and what do you try to do? You try to figure out what time it is. You try to immediately, the first thing you do is try to orient. You try to say like, okay, what day is it? Where am I? Who am I? You're trying to orient yourself. And when you're not oriented, when you don't know where you are, who you are, what time it is, it's stressful for your conscious mind. Like, it's like, what time is it, right? Why is it so stressful? Because if you don't know what time it is, you don't know what to do, right? So why right now, Dan, are you not putting on your pajamas, washing your face, and getting ready for bed? Because
I
it's not
could be
time for
because
that.
I'm
You
pregnant.
could be.
Could
Exactly.
be. But no,
Right.
I'm not tired.
But it's not time for that. Why am I not decorating for Halloween or Christmas right now? It's not time for that. It's almost time for that. It's not time for that. So it's we are we need to know what time it is so we know what to do. The body has, and every cell has, hundreds and thousands of tasks to do every second. It needs to turn on genes, turn off genes, release hormones, create hormones, do mitophagy and autophagy, and clean house and detoxify and repair. Like, it has so much to do, just like we do. And coincidentally, we were designed or evolved, whatever again you believe, to do certain things better at certain times of the day. So, for example, I am better at podcasting during the day versus if you were to catch me at like 10 o'clock at night, you have a podcast, I'd be like, no way. My brain would just not be on, right? Same thing where it was like, oh, you have to present at this conference and your presentation time is 5 a.m. I'd be like, no, please, like, please, can I go, like at 12 or something, right? So that's just our brain, but also, for example, we're better at digesting, we're better at metabolizing, we're better at hunting for food and problem solving during the daytime, as we are diurnal creatures. That word, again, is another word I didn't know what it meant. It's the opposite of nocturnal is diurnal. So we're awake during the day, asleep at night. So that's why we're better at doing all these sort of active tasks during the day. And then we're better at doing things like sleeping and repairing and restoring in the evening time, right? And that makes sense. So when the body doesn't know what time it is, what is it going to do? Is it going to release that hormone even though it has it made? No, it's not getting that go ahead. So I like to think about this part of the hypothalamus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Not important, but it's called the SCN. And the SCN I like to think about as the control tower in an airport. So let's say the plane is like, hey, I'm coming in for landing, and it doesn't hear that go ahead from the control tower. It's not going to land that plane. It's going to be like, I'm going to just err on the side of caution and not land the plane. Same thing with our bodies. So if the SCN is not getting that go ahead, then it's not going to produce the hormone. It's not going to detoxify that cell. So a lot of things are just off because the body doesn't know what time it is. And also on an internal level, it's very stressful for the body. So we talk about nervous system regulation and all these things, and not knowing what time it is very stressful for our bodies as well as our conscious mind. So how does the body tell time? That was your next question. The body tells time with blue light. What I already mentioned, blue light. So there's a specific wavelength of light from the sun that our bodies evolved to use to tell what time it is, because it was a reliable source that the sun goes up, and that's as soon as the sun crosses the horizon, when the sun rises, that's when blue light becomes present in our environment. And then that blue light increases as the sun goes up in the sky, and then it starts decreasing when the sun goes down in the sky, and then it disappears completely when the sun goes down. So this blue light was only available when the sun was up. And so by the amount of that blue light in the sky, our bodies know what time it is, which is super cool. And sometimes you can kind of look at the sky and be like, you kind of know what time it is by what the sky looks like. We just have like an idea. Like, I could look outside right now and be like, it's definitely not 8 a.m. Like, it is not an 8 a.m. sky, right? So it's pretty cool. So as I mentioned earlier, with all of our modern technology, you can start to connect the dots and see where this is going. That originally, before we had light at night, we used firelight, right? It had orange and red hues, and that light doesn't impact our circadian rhythm, which I didn't explain, so I'll just explain that really quickly after this. But this blue light is now present in our environment when the sun is down, and that is causing us to be confused. I look at it like you know what, a mosquito zapper that's like got a light on at night, all the bugs are flying into it. It's confusing them. It's tricking their circadian rhythm. And so the same thing is happening to us. We're like mosquitoes flying into a light. We're like addicted to this blue light. And it's very addicting too with the dopamine. It's so addicting. And so what this blue light is doing in our environment when the sun has gone down and we just innocently just flip on lights or turn on the TV or use our phones, it's telling our body it's daytime. And so instead of wrapping up the day and saying like, okay, cortisol is going to come down and let's bring up that melatonin. She's going to get ready to sleep. We're going to make her sleepy. And we're also, melatonin is one of our most powerful antioxidants that's involved in like every repair process in our body. So the melatonin that should be coming up and helping us sleep and repair, no, that's not coming up because the blue light is saying cortisol time, baby. Let's raise those stress hormones. So people who are tired and wired, it's like, I'm tired, but I can't fall asleep. Ask yourself, were you just scrolling on your phone? Did you have a light bulb on? Was the TV on? Especially were overhead lights on. So those blue receptors that we have in our eyes and on our skin for blue light, they're also very set up for overhead light, which makes sense because the sun is overhead. So that then easily leads into some strategies that we can use to help mitigate this, right? Because what I'm not suggesting is that we need to live like the pioneers and live in a tent and throw out our light bulbs. People are like, well, Dani, I need to see at night. Me too. So there's solutions. Yay, right? So one of the simplest things is just turning off overhead lights at night, right? And then we can think about, okay, let's mimic the fire. So we can use amber, orange, red colored light bulbs and even candles and firelight. Obviously, that would be great. But we can get these simple light bulbs and switch out some of the lights in some lamps in our room. So one of my lamps in my bedroom has a white light and one of them has a red light. Easy. So I turn on the red one at night. They have these little red night lights that you can buy, motion lights on Amazon. So you stick one in your bathroom. And then when you go to the restroom in the middle of the night, you don't have a white light waking you up or anything like that. So there's little things we can do to mitigate some of that. Your screen on your phone, I have my inner child on my phone. So 1, 2, 3, if I click the side 3 times, then I just turn my phone screen red. So, and if you have an Android, you can use the Twilight app and turn your phone red. So we can use these different things to protect our eyes from receiving that blue light, which would signal again to the body to produce cortisol, blood sugar, and insulin. Yeah. So knowing what time it is really important. And we're confusing our body big time by the lights that we have on at night.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Mind blowing. I hope everybody's like not feeling too overwhelmed, but also this is so important, this information. Yeah. I've been learning this myself over the years. And fun side note fact, as I'm even preparing for labor, I've been learning about the importance of light during labor and like obviously keeping out the blue light and staying in obvious natural light, whether it's daytime or nighttime. Will dramatically affect my body's ability to like flow with labor and actually produce the proper hormones that I need to push the baby out. So places like hospitals are actually the worst place to give birth just because of the lighting and the beeping and the technology versus like I'm hoping to be at home with candlelight and a fire burning. And so anyway, side note, this is important for like babies and like just the labor process because it does direct so much of our hormones as you're already speaking. Yes. So this is really relevant and helpful reminder for me as I've been doing some of these things that you've been sharing and starting slowly to like add the red light bulbs places and turn off the lights at night and, starting to light candles and different things. Yeah. So yeah, there's a process there. So you may have already like mentioned this a lot, but I want to pull this out for anybody thinking like, okay, this is a lot. This is a lot, and, as you mentioned already, where most people are not necessarily going to just start living outside again and really going back to the ancestors. Yeah. Well, I'm trying it a little bit. Well, not quite, but that's a big part of like my goal and path, and like having this homestead now and living more on the land and being outside more and not inside on my computer as much and all the things. So
Yes.
still a work in progress, because boy, do I love to watch a Netflix at night, which I can put movie mode on and it has a red light blocker on my computer as well. So
Amazing. Well,
yeah,
oh,
we can do
one
these
more
things.
thing just on that note I
Yeah.
didn't mention is that orange lens blue blocking glasses are really powerful to like, because my TV doesn't have a mode
Right.
that I could turn off any blue lights. So a lot of people have clear, they're like, oh, my glasses already have blue blocking technology in it. I have bad news for you if you have the clear ones. It blocks out this, it does block some blue, but it's like a blue violet hue, which is not the blue that is of concern. So they do work, but they're not effective for what we need. So in the evening, every time the sun is down, I think put my orange lenses on, because I have neighbors who have street lights. They don't do all the circadian stuff. So my house is red, but I get lights coming in and, little lights on devices and things. So I put on my orange lens blue blockers. And I have a lot of people saying like, well, do those things really work? The short answer is yes. And there are also studies that show that people who wore orange lens blue blockers 2 to 3 hours before bed for only 1 month had a statistically significant improvement in their fasting blood sugar and measures
Wow.
of insulin resistance. So this stuff is so legit and so grounded in actual science that we can measure.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is my clients are like, oh my gosh, Dani, it's normally taking me 2 hours to fall asleep every night. My head hits the pillow and 10 minutes later I fall asleep. Or like, I'm sleeping so much better through the night. My blood sugar is so much better the next day. I mean, we're seeing so many improvements, like anecdotally as well. So that's another strategy that can be really a great place to start too. Even if before you get the light bulbs, those orange lens glasses can be so helpful.
That's amazing, because that's something that you could travel with, right? Like something you could
Yeah,
also take with you or go to your friend's house who don't have red light bulbs, or it
exactly.
seems like
I
easier
wear
than
them
trying to
in
figure
public.
out all the lamps and all the like.
Totally. Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, even in our kitchen, I'm like, there's no red light in this kitchen. Like, what am I doing? And especially as it gets darker now, I'm going to be cooking in the dark. And like,
Yeah.
yeah, anyway.
A Himalayan
So,
salt lamp. A lot of people have
yeah,
those. Those are good ones as well.
yeah,
So just trying to think of things that people already do have. And even like doing the stove light, which is like
yeah,
facing down, it's a little dimmer. That would be a really good like first step. Like turn off the overheads, just use the stove
yeah,
lights. And a
yeah,
Himalayan salt lamp, it's like, okay, this is a little more doable, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I love that.
Baby steps.
Yeah. So, what would you say are, and you've mentioned this a little bit already about the morning, but I'm curious,
Yes.
like, what are the times, since we're not living permanently outside,
Mm-hmm.
but the scary amount of 90% of our day is spent inside for the majority of people? Uh, what are the most important times of day to be outside? And how
That's
long do we need to stay out there for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let's start with how long do we need to stay outside? I always say, okay, someone will tell me, I was outside for, let's say, um, 15 minutes in the morning and then 15 minutes in the afternoon. And I was like, okay, so you were outside for 30 minutes and you were inside for 23 hours and 30 minutes. So I just like to
Right.
show that to say there, but the 30 minutes is better than 0 minutes, right? So the idea is we want to develop consistency. And we also know that the more healing that you need to do, perhaps the more time you will need outside. However, like 2 minutes is better than 0 minutes. 5 minutes is better than no minutes. Like it's just like do what you can, and every day you may have a different requirement. So it's like, oh, during the weekends I can do a lot of time outside, but during the work week I just can't. So then you're just going to do the best you can, right? So the most important time to be outside is the time right around sunrise. This morning light is so powerful. We get all that infrared, but also the addition of the blue into the environment, which is going to signal our body to turn on that circadian clock. The circadian rhythm is just, it is our sleep wake cycle. It's a 24-hour rhythm because we live on a planet with a 24-hour day. So that's why it's that long. but it basically tells all the it's I think about the light, and especially that blue light, like a conductor in the orchestra. So it'll say, okay, we have a little bit of blue light coming in. Okay, cue the cortisol. Okay, cue the like, and it just
Love it.
gently turns things on instead of, let's say we flip on a light or we look at our phone or we open the fridge. That's a giant burst of blue light. So the body's like, oh my God, it's 11 a.m. And there's no infrared. So what happens? You get a giant burst of blood sugar on your CGM because you're getting that rise in cortisol. So it's this beautiful, gentle way of sort of waking up your body. And this should start to trigger all sorts of hormones, like I said, and one of them is our appetite hormones. A lot of people aren't hungry in the morning. And this is what I saw change a lot from like 2018 when I first started practicing to now. I'm seeing so many people with just this chronically high blood sugar. And they're like, Dani, I do intermittent fasting. I'm working out. I'm only doing 2 meals a day. And like, I'm struggling. And I'm like, because number one, you're not a man. And this is most of my clients. And a lot of that advice is helpful for men.
Right.
And I will say it probably was helpful for you if you were a female at the beginning. It does help at the beginning. But what happens is that a small stressor, like a little bit of a stressor, like skipping breakfast once, we can look at that as like a hormetic stressor. And that word just means like we stress the body and then it becomes stronger because it adapts to that stressor and it gets stronger. But a chronic stressor over time, like let's say running and you have a sprained ankle, it's going to make it worse because the stress you just put on it, the body couldn't adapt. So it actually made it weaker. And so that's what we're seeing with like this chronic skipping breakfast, coffee for breakfast, waking up early to work out. I feel like if you're, a female listening to this and you're putting yourself in that category and pushing yourself so hard, it almost feels like that is like this masculine energy of doing and pushing and cutting carbs and efforting. Whereas what I see being so healing for so many women, and it's like I feel like it's good news for so many of us, is doing less. It's the receiving, the being, the receiving this light and getting our feet on the ground instead of pushing yourself at the gym. I see women losing weight by stopping the early gym, by eating breakfast in the morning and eating 3 meals in a day, if instead of the fasting piece. And they're like, oh my gosh, like my hormones came back online. Like I'm not struggling to fall asleep anymore. It's so deeply healing. And part of it has to do with the light and part of it has to do with the timing of when we're eating our meals. Like I said, we're better at metabolizing meals early in the day. So when we cut that meal out and we're asking our body to basically run on stress hormones all morning without giving it nourishment, and then we're eating at the second half of the day and maybe perhaps later into the night when we're not as good at metabolizing food and our blood sugar responses to these meals are potentially worse, it's like, oh, we can just flip-flop that. So some people still do well with intermittent fasting, but via skipping a dinner or an early dinner. So this early eating window, it can feel really hard for a lot of people to wrap their mind around because they're sort of in this cycle of, okay, I push myself until lunch and then that's my first meal and I eat at dinner and then they kind of feel snackish. Maybe they didn't have enough food or enough protein that day. Then they feel snackish in front of the TV at night because maybe they also have these blue lights on them and it's triggering their appetite. Yeah. And so they eat and they feel the guilt and the shame. So they double down on the fasting in the morning. And I want to say to them, I want to just hug them and say, you're not weak. It's that your system is designed to fail you. That's not the system that's going to support your endeavors. And so if we can start to move our eating window gradually earlier, see the sunrise, be outside, eat breakfast, even before coffee, that can be really supportive. So I know I went off a little on a tangent there, but morning light, hugely powerful for regulating our circadian rhythm, turning it on, getting the gentle rise of cortisol, and all that red light. And then and while you're doing all this, try to be grounded. You can ground, that means bare skin. So it could be feet or hands or like your nose, like whatever body part, just bare skin touching some form of a natural surface. So tree bark is not super conductive, but trees are so magical that they still do have, healing powers. But I would suggest maybe like a leaf, especially if anything is damp, a natural body of water, stone, brick, even cement is conductive. It's still made of natural material. It's just shaped by humans. But something like asphalt or turf, that is not conductive. So those wouldn't work. But the other ones would. Wood, actually, like dead trees, not conductive either. So something that's rooted into the earth or stone. Some people can ground in their basements because they have like a cement slab basement, right? So while you're, outside, get the grounding in as well. I have bought, by the way, the grounding shoes because now I see the value. I have 3 pairs. um, but then the other time of the day that's really important is this UVA light. And this comes when the sun is about 10 to 30 degrees off the horizon. This time of day is so powerful because this UVA light, when it strikes our skin, it not only makes us get endorphins and serotonin and dopamine and epinephrine so we can feel happy and motivated and focused, it also helps us create thyroid hormones so we can metabolize our food better and just run all these processes in our body. And it creates an antioxidant called molecular hydrogen. It also creates melanin, which is the pigment in our skin that is so powerful. It sequesters heavy metals, so it can help keep heavy metals out of your cells, which is like getting a tan can help me do that. Yeah, it can. And then that melanin is really important for building in natural sun protection. And so then during the summer months, or if you live near the equator all the time, so that would be peak hours of the day when they tell you to avoid the sun, I disagree with that recommendation because that is the only sunlight that's going to help us make vitamin D. We can't get vitamin D from the sun all day. Some people thought that, but it's really only from this UVB light, this strong, overhead sunlight during summer months. And when you have that natural melanin in your skin, this pigmentation, it helps to provide natural sunscreen for you so you don't have to put it on because all sunscreen blocks all vitamin D conversion. So if you go outside and you're like, oh, I just put on sunscreen, you're blocking your body from making vitamin D. You're skewing that light signal. And same thing with sunglasses. We are more prone to burning when we have sunglasses on because our body, we're finally outside, the 10% of the day that we're outside, and then we cover up and we cover up our eyes. And it's like, I see these sunglasses. I just want to gently, lovingly rip them off people's eyes and be like, you're missing the benefits, right? But then you're also at a higher risk of burning because the eyes are not sensing this bright UV signal, and so it can't prepare the skin accordingly. So I am very pro smart sun exposure, and smart sun exposure begins at sunrise. We have all that infrared light prepping the skin to receive the stronger UV light. We have the UVA, which is building melanin, which is a natural protector and sun, sort of like a sunscreen. And then for me, like when I'm very tan right now, when I go out in the summer, I don't burn. So I don't need sunscreen because I've built this tan. So if you have pale skin, you may have had the experience where, let's say you wore a different bathing suit, and so like a white strap mark was showing, and maybe you went in the sun and just the white strap turned pink and sunburned, but all the other skin around it didn't. That's the power of the melanin. And so I really also just want to call out, if you have a darker skin tone, so if you have like equatorial DNA, this is there's a Fitzpatrick scale. So from 1 to 6 on the Fitzpatrick scale, 1 would be maybe someone like you or with blonde hair, blue eyes, like Irish ancestry, but you might be closer to a 2 because you do tan.
Yeah, I tan. I don't burn very well. And I don't wear sunscreen either.
Yeah. But someone who's more of like a 5 or a 6 on that scale, who has very dark skin already, lots of already natural sunscreen built in, it's like they're wearing SPF 100. So what happens if they move to somewhere like Canada, they're at a really big mismatch. And what happens is, not only is the mainstream telling even people with darker skin to wear sunscreen, but now there's not enough light to penetrate to give them vitamin D sufficiency. And vitamin D is so important because it's so important for our metabolic health, our immune health. And so what we want to do is max out safely in the time that we can. And then finally, the last step is, if you just expose yourself to UVB light, it's like a hormetic stressor for the body, right? So there is a little bit of damage, and we can heal that by getting in the sunset light, which is like, again, a giant infrared light panel. So we can heal the skin. You can reverse sun damage. You can anti-inflame the skin. You build collagen. You reduce wrinkles, all those things from the sunset light. So all that to say that the sun is it's like a whole spectrum, and we want to get out in that full spectrum. Just like we know that taking a B12 vitamin is not the same as having a whole piece of steak. That's what we're doing when we're taking a vitamin D tablet and saying this is enough. No, it's not replacing the sun. We need the sun in its full spectrum because it has so many benefits, and there's more benefits to UVB than the vitamin D, but that's there's just more. But I look at vitamin D deficiency as a sunlight deficiency. And I also, controversial, I don't think we should be taking vitamin D in the winter, especially if we've gotten enough. Like I'm not going to be taking vitamin D this winter. I've been outside all summer. And what they're finding is that melatonin in the season of darkness, which is winter, starts to take over some of the functions of vitamin D. So that's really cool. So a lot of people are in Canada and they're like, well, what do I do? The sun's going away. I don't have all this light. What you need to do is lean into whatever outdoor environment you have. And that's the challenge. You don't have to move to the tropics to get well. You have to be willing to get outside. I've seen you cold plunge in a lake. You have to lean into the cold. You have to lean into the darkness and these healing practices. And what I find is that we need to allow shifts to take place in the different seasons. We don't want to do the exact same thing every single day. I think a lot of women have seen the benefits of changing their routine based on where they're at in their menstrual cycle. Yeah. And if we zoom out and put that for the whole year and all these seasons, we want to lean into those seasons as well. So it's just, I feel a beautiful practice. It's just, I don't know. I just get chills thinking about it because it's so aligned with nature, and it just feels so right. It feels so like, yes, so simple, so pure, so beautiful. Yeah.
I feel that too. And I love that you're bringing this forward and sharing this from like a scientific lens as well, because I mean, that has to be the answer, like getting back to connecting with nature more, right? And be honoring where we live in the world, honoring our cycle, honoring the moon cycle, like all of these rhythms that have existed forever to keep us alive and healthy and thriving, right? And then we've gone in and tried to like mix it up as human beings and have totally messed up. Like we're not getting healthier, we're getting sicker, right? That's pretty clear. And you kind of answered this a little bit, but one of the questions that I had before we start wrapping things up was like this selfish question for me and everyone else who lives in Canada. Like, it is really hard to get outside when like in those times of year where it's like dark and it's blizzarding and it's raining and there's like ice everywhere. Like I have sometimes gone out just like really quickly barefoot in the snow, but I'm not doing that often because it's really painful and it's really cold. But like, how do we, do you have any tips or suggestions or tricks to get outside? Like this is something I definitely struggle with in the winter. It's like getting outside, even when sunrise is like 9 a.m., like 10 a.m., it's easier to kind of get out then. But if it's so cold outside, another factor is like we're covered, right? I'm not naked outside. I would have gloves on or a hat on, shoes on. So like what can those of us do in the northern climates where it's like cold? It's not only just dark, but it's like hard to get outside because it's cold.
Yeah. So first off, I want to say anytime the sun is down, so if the sun is only rising at 9 o'clock and you're up by 6, you want to wear those orange lens blue blockers. We want to keep that night mode going. I call it like sunset mode. So we still want to have the orange lights, red lights. We want to keep that going while the sun is down. And so we want the first light that your naked eyes see be the sunlight, even if it's cloudy, even if it's blizzarding, even if it's raining. And sometimes you may just have to crack a window. The screen, a lot of people have screens and they're like, do screens interfere? That's fine. The screens are okay. Glass is not okay. So we want to just, even if you can, just open a window, sit there. The cold will be coming on your face, but if you can, just look at the sky gaze east, that's great. And some days when the weather does not permit, like if it was like I used to live in Florida, if it was like hurricaning out, yeah, I'm not getting outside that day, and like maybe I won't even open a window. There are days where this is going to happen, and sometimes there's periods of time where we're just not going to get the best. If you're snowed in, you can't do anything, right? You can purposefully add infrared, which is very healing. So like this red light therapy panel, you can do things like that. We have always, as humans, had practices where we're bringing in infrared. We used fire, hot springs. Many cultures have heat practices like hammams and saunas and, like different things, but also tons of cultures have cold practices. And this is where we want to build up our tolerance to the cold, and getting yourself having deliberate cold exposure, especially cold water exposure, builds what's called brown adipose tissue. And that is this brown fat that is metabolically active that helps you stay warm. It helps upregulate your thyroid, and it helps you actually burn fat. So what you can do, same thing with the sun. If you were very pale, I wouldn't say go outside at 1 p.m. No, I would say go out early in the morning and then do like maybe a little bit at 11:30 for 5 minutes, and then for 10 minutes, and then 15 minutes, right? You're building up that solar callus or tan. Same thing with the cold. So go outside, go out there fully clothed, and stand out there. See if you can take one finger out of a glove and touch something on the ground if you can, but be out there for the cold, and then stay out in longer doses. And what I like to do is you stay out there until you shiver, and that's when you're building the brown adipose tissue. But keep in mind, some of these practices are hormetic stressors. So some people can't tolerate them all right away. So something like a red light therapy, easier to tolerate than something like a sauna. Something like standing out in the cold for 5 minutes, better than jumping in a cold plunge, or like a cold face dunk. So that's a good way to start building your tolerance to cold. But it's just a matter of doing the best you can. Maybe taking a hike, if it's, weather permitting, but in the winter would be good because you're moving. So you're kind of keeping warm, but you're still out in the elements, right?
Yeah.
So thinking, and then, skiing and all sorts of, snowmobiling, all sorts of things that you can think of to do when you can, but don't be like, oh my God, I have to get outside for an hour and stand out there barefoot in the snow. No, like little bits, let yourself adjust gradually. And I did, speaking of your baby that's coming, apparently Scandinavian mothers leave their babies out in like a stroller.
That's how I was napped.
Like, that's how you napped. Oh
yeah. Yeah. As a child, it's my Danish consent. And that is exactly what I'm going to be doing with our baby.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah. All naps are taken outside, except for at night, obviously. You sleep inside.
That's amazing. I love it. See, these practices, what I find, you're like, oh, this is great for labor. It's like what I find is everywhere I look, it's like, oh yeah, there's benefits for this. There's benefits for this. It's just modern technology. We're too smart for our own goods. So we need to mitigate our own,
Are we that smart?
I know. It's like
messing with nature doesn't really seem like a smart thing to do, but yeah.
I know. Yeah. So one would argue, are we smart? Yeah.
In the name of efficiency and quote unquote progress, right?
Yes.
This has been fascinating, Dani. Oh my goodness. Yay. I love this topic. I love that you're starting to talk more about this. I've learned so much from you, even just like how to turn my phone red. Like you have a great tip on that on your Instagram. Yes. And just, there's so much here for all of us. And I'm curious if really quickly before we wrap up, anyone listening to this who may feel super overwhelmed, because I know that this has been a process for me, and I'm sure for you, over months, if not years. So where would you recommend somebody starts? Like if there was just one thing that they can do, because there's a lot here, like change all the lights in your house, stop using lights at night, get blue blockers, get outside in the sunrise and in the midday and at night. Like there's a lot that we can do, right, to start coming back. And for people who maybe are so disconnected, really living the indoor lifestyle, go to work in an office, come home and watch TV, what would you say is the most important place to start?
The most important place to start, I would say there's two most important places, and it would be a morning and a night thing. So starting to get outside, and the second you wake up, get outside. And that should be the first light that you see. So ideally, we're going to work our way towards getting up around sunrise, but that's an ask. That's a big ask for people, right? So for the time being, just get outside in the morning and see the sky with naked eyes. Work your way towards waking up around the sunrise and getting outside at that time. And that would be great. And then the other thing is an orange blue blocking glasses. Like, I would say that is so powerful for blocking that signal at night. It's an absolute game changer. And I do have a program coming out called It Starts with Light. And so it's going to walk you through every single one of these steps. It's going to answer all those questions. What about in Canada? What about this? What about when this happens? And it's designed to be done sort of over a 4-week period, but you can do it over any period of time that you like. But it's really saying, okay, we're going to look at some blue blockers today. You're going to choose one that work for you. We're going to go around the house. We're going to look at your light bulbs. We're going to see what you might want to buy and what your budget is. So maybe 1 month you buy one light bulb, the next month you buy the next light bulb, So, but it's going to walk you through all these things and teach you more about that. But it's also going to have some just easy takeaways for people who are just like, too much information. I just want the Coles notes or the Cliffs notes. Here in the US, we call them Cliffs notes. But yeah, so that's coming out, so I can send you the wait list if that would be helpful.
Please do. That's amazing. Yes. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah.
That's so needed and going to be an incredible offering. Which is perfect timing, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you next. What are the current ways that you're working with your clients, supporting people, if anybody's really resonating with this and wants to obviously come and get some help from you and all of this incredible wisdom that you have, and then where can people find you and come connect with you?
Sure. Yeah. So the free places are Instagram. Danielle Hamilton Health is still my handle. My podcast name changed to Light Up Your Metabolism. So that's that. And I also have my blood sugar mastery program is really combining all the light and the food pieces. And that's my small group coaching. It's a very intimate cohort situation where you're getting lots and lots of one-on-one coaching from me and your next steps. And that's what I think is missing for so many people, because there's so much great advice out there, but people are applying it to themselves when they're actually not a good candidate for it, but they don't know. And so I see people kind of piecemealing these protocols, and it's like on paper, it looks great. And so they feel like they're trying everything, but they're not doing what works best for their body and what their body's needing. So what I do is I help people get in touch with what their symptoms are and let their body lead. And their body is telling us, what do you need? Do you need these carbs? Do you need fasting? Do you need to not fast? Like, do you need to work out, or do you actually need to rest? So we let the body lead, and it's just a beautiful, I've run the program 21 times and I keep running it because it's so fantastic. And I just get the most incredible people who sign up for that, as I'm sure you do in your cohorts too. So that's my primary offering right now. And I'll have some smaller online programs coming down the pipeline.
Amazing. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So great. Yes. Highly recommend Blood Sugar Mastery. Amazing program. I've had many clients who have gone through your program and then come and did my program and just like rave about it. So I know it's incredible. And I love that you're obviously bringing some more of this light and grounding stuff into that program. Yes. So it's like the whole package, which is just absolutely incredible.
It's really improving. I mean, people's progress are now just like skyrocketing. It's so cool.
Level.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, anybody who's resonating with anything that Dani has shared with us today, please go and connect with her. She's very active, shares some amazing content on her podcast, on Instagram. Reach out to her. She's very approachable, and I'm sure would love to speak with you. So
I answer all my DMs. So feel free to send me a message.
I can't believe you still do that.
I still do. Yes, I do.
Yeah. Thank you so
All
much
right.
for coming on the show again.
Thanks for having me
And
on.
I know we'll have you back again. You're going to be
Yes.
a like constant repeat, like annual
Oh.
visitor. We'll have you.
Oh, thank
and
you.
There'll be something new for you to talk about next year, I'm sure, as you
Yes.
learn more. And
Yeah.
thank you for teaching this and this reminder for all of us, even myself included, to just get back to the earth and get back to our rhythms and get outside. I got to do that.
Yeah.
I did
Get
that
outside.
this morning.
And
I
just
got
crack
to go
a
do that
window.
now.
Crack a window. Yeah. Amazing. All right. Love you, Dan.
Yeah. Thanks,
Bye.
Dani. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with someone you love. It helps me incredibly reach more people and help more women who need this information. And if you're ready to go deeper into discovering your unique root causes and patterns keeping you hooked on sugar year after year, be sure to come and check out the brand new free root cause quiz that will give you actionable items to finally begin healing your relationship with sugar from the inside out. You can find the link to download this quiz and other amazing resources in the show notes below. I also wanted to just take a quick minute to share a disclaimer. The information provided in this podcast is for general purposes only and is not at all intended to be professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And as much as I do my best to bring you up-to-date and accurate information, please remember that I'm also sharing my opinions, stories, and ideas that are ultimately not supported by mainstream science. My personal advice should not be taken as professional advice, and you are always encouraged and advised to consult with your own healthcare practitioner before making any changes to your health and wellness routine. This podcast is intended to inspire and offer you alternative views to healing your relationship with food, mind, and body. It is up to each listener to take responsibility for their own health and wellness decisions. I hold no liability or responsibility for your results or lack thereof. Thanks for tuning in to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode. Let's go.